Some Google Ads recommendations are excellent and will help improve performance if you implement them, but others are not good at all and will hurt your results. I've spent more than $20 million on over 1,000 Google Ad campaigns, and I've worked out which ones you should listen to and which ones you should ignore. In this video, I'm going to go through them and let you know. Okay, so let's start by going through some recommendations that Google makes about your Google Ad campaigns that you do want to listen to, that are mostly good and that you actually want to implement. Then we'll go through the bad stuff that you absolutely want to ignore and can hurt your results. So the first one is to add assets to your ads. So if your responsive search ads are a little thin, you've only added in the minimum number of headlines, descriptions, either haven't added in information for the various assets like site links or call outs, or there's all sorts of various different types of assets, right? If you haven't added information there, or you have but it's fairly limited, then Google will make a recommendation for you to add assets to your ad, to basically bulk it out. So write extra headline options which will allow Google to test between the minimum that you've added in, the 3 that you've got there, and a whole bunch of others. Same with some descriptions. And then obviously make sure you add in those assets if you haven't already. Things like site links, call outs. Depending on your business, you can have call extensions, promotion extensions, a whole bunch of different options, right? Now, Google will tell you that if you add those in, it'll likely improve performance, particularly improve your click-through rate. Your ad is going to take up more space, particularly with adding in those assets, more space on the page. That improves click-through rate. If you add in extra headline variations, description variations, Google has more options to test. You might find more winning combos, improve your click-through rate, and all things being equal, a better click-through rate results in better return on ad spend from your Google ads. There's no downside in doing this. It's not one of those where you're like, oh, okay, I can see the upside, but there's potential downside. There's none. It's just a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra effort. So this is one you want to go ahead and use. The next recommendation that Google might make around your Google ads that I would recommend you listen to is to include popular keywords in your headlines. You want to do this anyway, and it's easy to miss, and Google will let you know if you've made a mistake. So I quite like using tight ad groups. And what I mean by that is that the ad groups don't have lots of different types of keywords in there. So we have extra ad groups, lots of ad groups, and they're very closely related to a keyword or a cluster of keywords that all have similar language, similar meaning. And what that allows us to do is then match the keywords that we're targeting, the searches that people are searching for, and the language that's used in our ads themselves. So we can match up more or less very closely what someone's searching for with what's actually going to appear as a headline in our Google ads. That has been shown time and time again to get more clicks and for people to convert better once they come through to your website, because they're going, oh, that's so close to what I searched for. That's exactly what I'm looking for. This company is going to be able to help me with my thing. They've got the product, they've got the service. Click through and go ahead and check it out. So when you have that sort of structure, you naturally end up very often using the keywords that you're targeting as headlines within your ads. But it's easy to make a mistake. It's easy to not miss them out. If you do see this pop up, definitely something that you want to go ahead and jump on. Okay, the next one is to make your headlines and descriptions more unique. This is one that can come up from time to time as a Google Ads recommendation. I think it's a decent one. It's not a big needle mover to go ahead and do this, but generic ads don't really stand out. And I think Google Ads as a marketing platform, particularly when we're talking about search ads, it's often treated differently from people as other types of marketing. We sort of forget about the creative aspect to it because there's no image, video, etc. We forget about doing something a little bit different, standing out from the crowd. It's not really seen as a platform for that, whereas something like meta ads, people are trying to do that all the time, right? But it really does help if you can think outside the box with some of your headline options, some of your description options. You might end up with an ad that gets way more clicks, gets way more conversions, because it really speaks to your audience. Now, when you try and think a little bit differently and you're not just replicating what everyone else is using in your industry for headlines, that's what most people do, right? They have a little search for their keywords, they see the ad to pop up and they're like, right, I'll use that headline and da-da-da. But then your ad just looks like everyone else's because you've modeled from theirs. Whereas if you do try and think a little bit out of the box, something a little bit different, there's a really good chance that those ones that are a bit different won't work at all. But that's why you've got a ton of options for responsive search ads to be able to add in lots of headlines, be able to add in multiple descriptions, to be able to even create extra site links with perhaps slightly different stuff and other assets, because you can afford to take 1 or 2 of those headlines and try something a little bit out there, a little bit strange. It may well not land, but if it does, that can result in a significant improvement in results. So when this one pops up, I think it's worth doing. You can take a bit of a risk on a few of them. Don't do it with everything though, right? Don't go, oh, okay, my ads are too generic. Let's change all the headlines and go with things that no one else is using. Yeah, that's a little bit too risky. There's probably a good reason why a lot of the headlines are being commonly used in your niche. It might be because that's closely related to the keyword that that everyone's targeting and the searches that people are searching for and things like that. But I do think that that's something that Google advertisers can be braver about, something I certainly try to do. So we'll get to some more Google Ads recommendations in a second, of whether or not you should listen to those other ones. Before I do, I want to quickly let you know about our done-for-you Google Ads services. And this is my biggest Google Ads recommendation, is that you just let my company create, manage, optimize your Google Ads for you. We'll take all that workload off your hands, make it really easy for you, and we'll get you better results because we spend millions on the platform and we've run thousands of campaigns across all the industries you can think of, tons of experience, we know exactly what we're doing. If that sounds like a great deal, go ahead and click on the link in the description below. That'll take you through to a page on our website where you can book in a free, no obligation call with one of my team members to find out exactly how we might be able to help. So go ahead and do that, and hopefully we get a chance to work together. The last Google Ads recommendation that I want to talk about that I think is a good one is fixing assets that have been disapproved. So if Google has disapproved a headline or an ad, asset, site link, something like that, description, then they will recommend that you fix it. Generally, I think that's a good idea. You can just leave them and think, okay, I've got other ones that have been approved, don't need to worry about that. But obviously you want as many live headlines, descriptions, things like that as possible within a responsive search ad so that Google has more options to test, more chances of finding winning combinations that can get you the best results. So why would you not take advantage of that, get rid of the old ones, change them, and put them in there? I mean, sometimes that's easy to do, right? It just requires like a small tweak. It might be just something that was not quite right with the wording or something along those lines, or maybe you made a little mistake with an element. Okay, quickly go ahead and put that in, too much grammar in there or something along those lines, right? But it's also good because you don't want to have too many disapproved elements sat within your Google Ad account. You get enough of those and you can start to run into Google Ad account wide issues. You don't want to get to a point where your Google Ad account gets suspended or disabled. I mean, this is unlikely to happen because you've had a few headlines or anything disapproved. But if you make a habit of just leaving lots of disapproved elements in your ad account, I don't think that's a good idea. So again, another recommendation that I think is a good idea to go ahead and implement. Relatively quick and easy to do, give it a go, sometimes just a small tweak. And if nothing else, you then free up extra spaces to be able to do more testing and get better results. Okay, so let's move on to the part that everyone's been waiting for. And these are the recommendations that are, let's say, not ideal, or you certainly want to pay close attention to and don't just want to implement, and there are often times where you don't want to implement them at all. And the first is optimize your budgets. Now, for the most part, Google's interests and our interests as Google advertisers very much aligned. They want to get us better results, that way we spend more, we scale, etc., etc. But when the company that you are paying says to get better results, you need to give us more money, that should always just cause a little, pause for thought. It doesn't mean that's necessarily wrong, right? Like, you could have a build around to be doing some renovation work at your property and they say, oh, okay, we found this extra issue, it's going to cost more, or actually to do this, how you really want it, it's going to cost, and they might be right. So they might be wrong, but they might be right. And we should always just stop and think, okay, is that actually true? Is that actually accurate? All right. So firstly, I would say that when it comes to optimizing budgets, which is nearly always a recommendation to scale, by the way, I always want you to be scaling your Google Ad campaigns from a position of strength. And what I mean by that is, at your current budget level, you've got good results, you want more of those good results, therefore you're scaling your budget. I don't want people to scale their ad campaigns because they're not getting good results and they think that by spending more, they will get good results. That's not really how it works. In fact, return on ad spend, or say cost per conversion, typically gets a bit worse the more you spend. Now, that might still be a deal that you want to take. So let's say, for example, you're spending $1,000 a month and you're getting a 5x return on ad spend. And you want to increase that from $1,000 a month to $5,000 a month. Well, by doing that, you might see your return on ad spend drop from a 5 to say a 4. Okay? And that happens because, your ads are being put in front of more people, potentially prospects are not quite as hyper responsive to your market and less likely to convert, etc., etc. The more you spend, the more you do that. So in that scenario, you might still want to scale because you're thinking, okay, yeah, our ROAS has dropped from a 5 to a 4, but we're getting a 4x ROAS on $5,000, so we're generating $20,000 worth of sales as opposed to a 5x ROAS on $1,000, $5,000 of sales. Like, I would happily have 4 times more sales, even if it's a slightly worse ROAS. So that's how it typically works, and that's why I want you to have good results a good return on ad spend, a good cost per lead, or whatever it is that you're tracking before you then scale, knowing that that's likely to get a little bit worse as you scale, as opposed to thinking, oh, I've got a 0.5x ROAS. If I just spent 5 times, 10 times as much, I'd be fine. It doesn't work like that. I've also seen scenarios where Google recommend increasing budgets. This particularly happens with something like Performance Max, where even based on their recommendations, it doesn't make sense. So let's say you've got a Performance Max campaign for an e-commerce business where we can see, the sales that are being generated, etc., etc. And I have seen scenarios where Google will say, increase your budget by X to get Y more sales. And I have seen scenarios where the X increase is more than the Y increase. Now, Google's predictions around that aren't always super accurate. So it might be that you increase by X and you get far more than Y extra sales. But yeah, that does just give you a pause for thought. You're thinking, hang on, you're telling me to up my budget by another $1,000 a day, but I only get another $800 a day in sales? That doesn't make any sense. So just go ahead and watch out for that. A good example of where the AI certainly isn't perfect. Okay, the next recommendation that I think you should really watch out for and really think about closely is to add broad match keywords. Now, this is one that comes up all the time in Google Ad campaigns, particularly the way I set them up, and I recommend you set them up where we don't use broad match keywords, at least to begin with, very often. We're going to start with phrase match, we're going to start with exact match, and then only once a campaign's performing well, look to add in broad match. Most of the time, there are exceptions if there's low search volume, etc., etc. And often we won't get to the point where we do add broad match if there's lots of search volume. It depends on the business. But you can take a high-performing search campaign that is focused on phrase and exact match and wreck it by introducing a load of broad match keywords. Because what can happen with broad match is that searches can cause your ads to be shown that are just not relevant anywhere near enough to the product or service that you sell. And if your budget's going to be spent putting ads in front of those people, getting clicks from those people, then your results are obviously going to get worse, and that's not going to work for you as a business. I can see why Google makes the recommendation around this one. They want to be able to put an ad in front of as many searches as possible. The more advertisers use broad match, the more flexibility Google has to be able to serve ads to those different searches. There are scenarios where adding in broad match keywords absolutely does help improve performance. I don't want to say it's always a bad recommendation. There are times where that gives you access to a lot more search volume, and if the campaign's already converting really well, again, you might see a drop in return on ad spend, but you get much larger volume, so it's a good trade. But just be really careful with this one. Don't just think, oh, Google Ads recommendation, I'll go ahead and implement this and this is going to help improve my performance. Often it won't. Now, as we're going through things I would and wouldn't recommend you do regarding your Google Ads, here's a recommendation that I'm very happy to make, and that's Hyros. Hyros is fantastic tracking and attribution software and can really help you improve your Google Ad results. It's a software that all the big players in the industry use, including myself. I use it to track results for my own ads across multiple platforms, including Google Ads, and all my organic results as well, which is super helpful. So if someone, for example, comes through and books a call for our done-for-you services, I can see exactly where that person came from. This is particularly important if you're running ads across multiple channels or generating customers organically as well. Without accurate data, you are flying blind, and knowledge is power. So if you want to improve the performance of your Google Ad campaigns and be able to see exactly where your leads and sales are coming from, go ahead and sign up to Hyros. There is a link in the video description. Okay, so the next Google Ads recommendation that I want to cover is removing conflicting negative keywords. So if you have an extensive negative keyword list, as I would recommend you do have, you're going to see this one quite often. I see it pop up all the time. It's one I nearly always ignore because I want my negative keyword list to filter out, well, bad searches, so ones that are just irrelevant to my products and services. But I also want it to filter out searches that might be relevant to my products and services, but don't perform well for me after that. So in other words, I don't want my ad to be put in front of searches that typically lead to lower quality leads or to people that are likely to click but not convert. That's the job of the negative keyword list. And my job as a Google advertiser is to maximize the return that I get from the budget. It's not to put my ads in front of as many people as possible, get as many clicks as possible. That's not the objective here. That might be Google's objective, but that is not my objective as an advertiser. So I'm perfectly happy to miss out on certain searches, and that's why this pops up, by the way. So Google's like, remove conflicting negative keywords because it's preventing, your ads from being shown to more searches. It's like, that's the point. That's exactly what I want. I want my negative keyword list to stop my ads being shown, not just in front of bad searches, but also searches that I just don't want to be shown up in front of. So it's absolutely how I would expect it to work. I would expect there to be a conflict if you have a really good negative keyword list working in conjunction with the keywords that you're targeting, there should be some conflict. There should be searches that your ads could be put in front of because of the keywords you're targeting that you go, oh no, actually, no, they don't really suit. We don't quite offer that. We found that people who search for this come through and become a lead, like those leads aren't as good quality, whereas people search for this, they're great quality, let's target more of those. And that's getting the most out of your budget. That's maximizing your return. So that's exactly how I would expect it to work. And therefore, out of all the recommendations that Google comes up with, that's probably one of the ones that I ignore the most. There are scenarios where I will pay attention to it. If we're struggling to scale, we need more search volume, then we will take a look at, trimming back our negative keyword list. But most businesses aren't in that scenario. And if we're not in that scenario, then we're definitely not going to pay attention to it. And before you go, have you seen my latest video on my favorite Google Ads scaling strategy? I show you exactly how it works in this video here. And if you want to scale your Google Ad campaigns profitably, and who doesn't, go ahead and give this a watch.